Welcome everyone back to the arena. Today we have another special guest. Her name is Dr. Bisleen Attli. She is a mental health focused and CBT certified naturopathic doctor, TEDx speaker, which is basically a fancy way of saying she bridges the world of psychology and physiology to promote mental health and brain health. So, first of all, Bisleen, thank you so much for being on and joining us today. Who is Dr. Bisleen Attli?
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt, for just having me on here. Super excited to be here and talk about all things mental health, one of my favorite passions. Great first question. Who is Dr. Bisleen Attli? I am so passionate about mental health and specifically holistic mental health. You'll see it in all my social media pages and just what I really enjoy talking about. And my journey with mental health and really struggling with my mental health began at a very early age. I was bullied when I was in middle school. I never really got a chance to learn how to cope with my mental health and all these difficult emotions I was dealing with. And when you are bullied in middle school, that's kind of the time when you're forming your self-image, and so my self-image became very distorted and negative at a very early age. In high school, the way I sought out coping was to be a high achiever, because I thought if I achieved, I'll feel better about myself. So I became an all-star athlete, straight A student, became involved in everything I could at school, and I slowly realized that that doesn't work, and everything slowly started to fall apart when I was in high school. And my life did a complete 180 when I remember when I was in grade 11. Started failing my classes, got involved with the wrong crowd of kids, and I quit all my sports teams. And I remember when I went to go talk to my doctor when I was in grade 11, and he said, just take these happy pills and you'll feel better. And so he told me I had depression, didn't really tell me much more about it, just take these happy pills and come back in about a month and I'll see how you're doing. And I just felt like in that visit I didn't feel heard, I felt more confused, and I didn't want to take these pills. And so because I didn't get the help and support I needed, my mental health just started to get worse and worse. And in second year university, I actually ended up in the hospital as a result of my depression. And that's when I really hit rock bottom, and I had a big an eye-opening moment of just being like, if I don't get better, I'm going to end up in the hospital again, and this time I might not leave. And I was a young person with very big goals and dreams, but I was just struggling so much with my mental health, with my self-image, that it just felt impossible to even just get out of bed in the morning. And so that's when my journey, really began on working on my mental health. I was in therapy. I remember I did group therapy, just doing everything I could to improve my mental health. I even was on antidepressant medication for a little bit. And I just was not getting the help and support and the improvement I really wanted to see. And then it wasn't until I really started to, work on my diet, my movement, my sleep, all of these things, and really putting my body and my physical state in a really healthy place, that I was like, wow, I'm feeling so much better. Now that I'm actually exercising and sleeping well and giving my brain the nutrients it needs, it's so much easier for me to control my thinking, for me to feel good about myself and my life, and to have the energy to pursue my goals. And through this, I discovered naturopathic medicine. I was like, oh my God, there's a profession I can actually get into that helps people with this. Like, yes, please sign me up. And so, yeah, that brings me ultimately to today, where I have my own private practice where I focus on mental health and really teaching people how to rewire their brain naturally.
And so I want to go back to what you mentioned, being bullied in middle school. And I think there's sometimes this perception or this idea, or I've at least heard before from a friend, that, we were talking about someone that was bullied in high school. And his perspective, my friend's perspective, well, he should have just stood up for himself. He was bigger than everyone else. Why didn't he just stand up for himself? And that is not the belief that I have. I think it's much more difficult psychologically to do that. And so I guess what did that feel like in that moment for you? And what would you say to someone that kind of has that idea that, well, people can just stand up for themselves?
Yeah. So interesting that you bring that up. It just, as you're just saying that, it makes me so emotional, because I wish it was that easy to just stand up for myself. And even looking back at myself at that moment in my life, I have so much compassion for myself, because I can see even as an adult how difficult it was for me to stand up for myself. Because what do you do when the whole class is against you? When the whole class has a perception of you? when the class teams up to make you feel awful about yourself? 1 versus like 25 at the age of 12. How are you ever going to stand up for yourself? You know? And I think that it's so important that when we look back at these times of our life, it's so important to remember that you were doing the best that you knew at that time. And even when I look back at that time of myself, right? So I think my culture and my background also plays a really big role in this too. So I'm South Asian, I'm from India. And to be quite honest with you, my culture does not support strong women. I've never been taught how to be a strong woman. And I was actually having a conversation with my mom about this the other day, and I was telling her, we were talking about how our culture is designed to make women be weak. It's designed to make women be people who listen to others, not be strong women who stand up for themselves and what they want. And so I think too, it's so easy to look back and be like, you know, you could have stood up for yourself, but it's like, how could you if you were just never taught that? Or it was never actually showed to you how to actually do it.
And so what ultimately worked for you, or how did that process kind of unfold? I think you mentioned you started hanging out around the wrong crowd, maybe to fit in. You mentioned starting to become a very high achiever, not only to be maybe accepted by yourself, but also to be accepted by others. And like, hey, look at me, look at everything that I'm doing. Like, I'm important, I matter. And I'm only saying that because it takes one to know one. But I'm just curious, like, how that process evolved through high school.
Yeah. What do you mean in terms of like how I went from being like that high achiever to everything starting to slowly unravel?
Yeah, sure. Let's go there.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Or how
Let's go
is it
there.
like how that I became like a high achiever or sought that as a way to kind of cope with my emotions?
Yeah, that, and like ultimately you
Yeah.
went from, you know, maybe being bullied quite a bit to
Yeah.
you hanging out with the wrong people. Like, my assumption is that
Yeah.
there's some indirect link to like how those things kind of happen. So I'm just kind of curious what was going on in your world.
Yeah, totally. So in middle school, I went to a completely different high school. So middle school specifically, I went to this school that had a special sci-tech program. So I was actually separated from a lot of the friends that I had in elementary school and was placed in a completely new environment. And then when it came time to high school, I was like, no more special programs. I don't want that. Instead, I want to go back to my home high school where I can reconnect with the friends that I had in elementary school. And I remember that summer of grade 8 to 9, I was like, I had the worst experience of my life in middle school, and I want to do everything to change my self-image. And so I kid you not, I spent 2 months like learning all the makeup, learning how to like style, and just like completely changing my self-image. I still laugh and joke and say all the makeup skills I have now are still from that time, from grade 8 to grade 9. I haven't learned anything new since then. And I was just so determined. It's almost like, you know, the brain learned like how you were before. It wasn't safe to be how you were. So let's try something new and build this new image and see if people accept and approve. And I think the saddest part about all this is that it worked, right? When I changed up my self-image and myself, people accepted me more. People liked me more. And I think like that's the saddest part when I look back at it, is I had to be a completely different version of myself to be completely accepted, because the version of myself I was before wasn't. And I think really just what started to happen is over the years, also being just involved with the wrong crowd of people, everything just slowly started to unravel for me, because when you're forced to put on this face every single day, it's like, how long are you going to do that until you just kind of completely break?
And so you being around the wrong people, so you talk a lot about health holistically. What role does your environment play in terms of who you become and ultimately who you want to be?
Yeah, huge role. Like I can clearly see, looking back at that time in my life, just being around the wrong crowd of people and being involved with them just completely shifted me, right? Because at the end of the day, and especially when you're at that young of age, and even now as adults, like we want to belong, right? It's like our inherent need to want to belong. And especially when you're in adolescence, I do so much work in schools as well. It's like they have a very deep need to belong. And we will bring ourselves down and match ourselves to our environment to feel like we fit in. And I think it's so important for adults today to understand that. If Everybody you hang around with is unhealthy and overweight. You want to feel like you belong. So what are you going to do? You're going to be unhealthy and overweight. If the people you hang around with are super fit, they're ambitious, what are you going to do? You want to feel like you belong, like you fit in with that group of friends. So you are going to match your internal state and need and show up in that way so you feel like you belong with that tribe. Because that is just like our deep inherent human need, and we'll have it for the rest of our lives. And that's why it's so important to look at your environment and the people you hang out with, because those are the people that you internally feel like you need to fit and belong with. And if they're not people that support your goals, your dreams, or the highest version of you, you're forever going to be playing it small in life.
And so it kind of, and it kind of reminds me of like, which I think is great. As a society, mental health has become much more mainstream. But I think even with the youth specifically, there's this like, people want to belong so much so that it's become cool in some circumstances to like have anxiety. Like that is like, oh, I have anxiety too, or I'm on this medication too. Like our sense of belonging is so deep that we'll do it even if it's not supporting us. You mentioned like if there's a ton of people overweight. Yeah. What are your thoughts on like, in terms of, there's tons of people in the world that will say like, well, people are the way they are. People don't change. Yeah. And it just made me think of, there was a time where I interviewed a lady on the show who was a porn star for 7 years. Yeah. And she found her faith, and obviously I don't know her from before, but the person that I spoke with was the most joyful, like pleasant, genuine person that I was around. Yeah. One of the most pleasant people that I've ever spoken with, and we stay in touch today. And so I obviously fully believe, because I also have changed quite a bit. 4 years ago, Matt would have never been sitting across from you. So, but there are lots of people that would argue otherwise. And so what are your thoughts around just like the ability to change, and maybe also from like the brain perspective, like rewiring your brain?
Yeah, I love that you asked this question, because just recently I released this YouTube video about the chemical imbalance theory and how it's been debunked. And I've been making more posts about it, and is it triggering people like so much? Because I think, more and more people are just starting to wake up to almost this live, this chemical imbalance. And I hear it in my practice all the time, and it's really unfortunate, but I hear it with younger people more than ever. And it's almost like, who is feeding you this stuff? Who is feeding you that you're going to be stuck this way forever, or that you have this imbalance in your brain, or your brain is just missing some chemicals, or something like that. So it's very interesting to hear younger and younger people getting this type of language, because I know they didn't make this up, and they're hearing it from other adults in their life. But I'm such a big believer in the fact that people can change. Like, your brain is constantly building new cells, new neurons, new pathways. It's something called neuroplasticity. And they've done research to show that people at 70, 80, they can rebuild their pathways and their cells and at that age. So your brain is constantly rebuilding itself. But I think what's important is making sure that you are in an environment that kind of supports that rebuilding, and not an environment that essentially kind of keeps you stuck in that space. I think, what makes it difficult is a lot of us have a subconscious identity belief about ourselves, and we constantly just pull ourselves back to that place and way of being.
And so how can we identify what that, because you mentioned it's subconscious, how can we identify what that core belief system might be that is, in some cases, subconsciously holding us back from the person we want to become, from our goals, whatever it might be?
Yeah, great question. One thing I'm going to caveat, I'm going to say, is that I really do believe that you hit a limit when doing this work with yourself. And I know, you've mentioned that you've been to therapy before, and I still, every once a month.
And I hit a limit.
You hit a limit, exactly, right? And every month I check in with my therapist, even if I have nothing going on in my life. I'm like, I just need to check in to talk to someone about stuff that I feel like I can't talk with other people. And every time I'm left with like, oh my God, I didn't see things in this way. And so I think it's so important to understand that when you're in the problem mindset, you can't find a solution. So it's important to understand that you will always hit a limit in terms of how deep you can take yourself. And that's not because something is wrong with you or that you're not capable of doing this work. It's just because you're so stuck in your current identity, your beliefs, you hit that limit, and you need someone else who's not stuck in that same stuff to be able to take you to those deeper layers. Because also, a lot of this work is scary. It is frightening. And I'm sure you've experienced it too, Mac, doing your work through therapy and whatnot. And
I used to dread therapy. At first I was like, oh my God, I got to do this. This gets so emotionally painful. Like, I don't want to do this.
so painful. And that's the other piece too, is your brain hates things that are painful, right? So again, trying to do this work on your own can be really difficult because you hit that block because your brain's just like, too painful. Let's go scroll on the phone or watch Netflix or eat some junk food because that feels easier instead of doing that emotional work. But I think a really good place for people to start with that awareness is to start taking note of some of those dysfunctional patterns that you find yourself stuck in. So we all have them, right? Those are the things that we're just like, oh my God, why do I keep doing this to myself? Like, why do I keep going at 10 p.m. on the dot every single night to the fridge and eating that tub of ice cream that I know I shouldn't, right? Or why is it with my husband or my wife, I pick a fight with them, like on like clockwork, right? Every single week, pick a fight with them, right? So start taking note of some of those patterns that you're just like, oh, I just keep finding myself attracting the same situations, types of people, or same habitual things that I keep doing. I think that there's so much awareness to be had in these moments because those things are speaking to your identity and how you're really showing up and what you truly believe about yourself.
And so what would you say are some of the most common reasons people come to you? And what do you find is like most misleading, meaning people think they're coming for one reason, but they're really coming for something else?
So a lot of times people come to me, one, they've tried everything else and then they're like, okay, let me try this route, which is unfortunate because I'm like, you should come to me first, not always last. Other times people come to, honestly, the big reason people come is they're really just fed up with a conventional care system because a lot of them feel like they haven't been seen, they haven't been heard, or they're simply been told to take medication and they just feel that there's like a deeper reason and they need more healing. The other big thing too is a lot of people really like that holistic aspect, and I think that's a huge piece missing in the mental health care space. So I always talk about how blood sugar dysregulation, inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, hormonal dysfunctions, poor gut health, liver health, all of these things can lead to mood disorders and poor mental health. And I think that's really not talked about enough in the mental health care space. And so I think that's what also brings a lot of people essentially into my work. Now, when people come to work with me, they think they're getting the diet and the movement and the sleep. But the first and most important place that I start with everybody is limiting beliefs work. And a lot of nervous system regulation. Because, I could give people the right diet, the supplements, all of that stuff, but they will not be able to be consistent with it because subconsciously they have a deep belief about themselves. And what ends up happening is that they continuously pull themselves back down to that level of worth they believe they deserve to be at. So if someone's limiting belief is, I'm not worthy, they will constantly pull themselves back to that. If someone believes that they are a failure, constantly pull themselves back to that. And so I do a lot of that limiting beliefs work so they can finally understand what is that identity and view of themselves they have that they keep bringing themselves back to and how to break out of it. And the second piece that's really important is nervous system regulation work. A lot of people don't understand this, but your current nervous system state, it's regulated to that identity and version of yourself that you are now. And if you want to make change, it means you have to stop acting on automatic and start showing up consciously as that version of yourself that you want to be. But all of us are moving so fast, we're constantly in the stress state, and we're never being conscious about the version of ourselves we're showing up as, and as a result of that, change doesn't actually ever happen. So those are kind of the first two things that I really start with, and a lot of people are surprised by this work, but when they actually implement it, everything else just works 100 times better.
And so at the most basic level, like, what is nervous system regulation?
Yeah, great question. So when it comes to nervous system regulation, you have different branches of your nervous system. And the two main important ones I talk about are the sympathetic state, which is your stress state, and then you have the parasympathetic state, which is the calm state. Now, this branch of your nervous system is called the autonomic nervous system. So it controls automatic things in your body, like your blinking, your breathing rate, right? So we don't have to think about, oh, I need to take a breath, or oh, I need to blink again, because your body does it for you. It also controls your digestion. And so when we're constantly in that sympathetic stress state, everything in your body is like constricting, okay? Constricting together. And so this means that you'll blink faster, you might talk faster, you might breathe faster, and nothing in your digestive system is working properly because everything is constricted and tight. On the other hand, when you're in that calm state, everything is just flowing so much better. You're slower, your breathing rate slows down, all your muscles unwind, and you're not as tense anymore, and your digestive system is working a lot faster. That is the state that you need to be in order to make change happen. So a lot of people, for example, will be like, oh, I've tried affirmations before, they don't work, or, none of these other mindset strategies work, and that's because their nervous system isn't regulated. If you're in the stress state, your brain can't take in all the change that you want to make in terms of your thinking patterns, in terms of your actions and how you're showing up. So before change can happen, the nervous system needs to be regulated, and then all of that other stuff works so much faster, because you can be like, in this moment, what version of myself am I showing up as, and who do I really want to be in this moment?
And so how do you, it reminds me of, there's a guy that I know well who's a neuroscientist, but he always says regulate before you rewire. And it kind of reminds me of what you
what's
shared.
His name? What's his doctor?
Dr. Chris Lee.
Dr. Chris Lee.
Yeah, he's like he's actually my business coach. He's great. I had him on the podcast. He's wonderful. Shout out Chris if you're listening. You should take a look at his work. It's really good.
Amazing.
How do you work with people who maybe come in, like I'm sure there's varying levels of dysregulation. Like how do you work with someone that is maybe like on the more extreme level of dysregulated, someone that has, and it's more, and is older, so the pathways are really, like, I don't know the right term, but it's really deep, like it's really deep rooted. Like how do you kind of start to doing that with maybe overwhelming their nervous system, the person more generally, like how does that work?
Yeah, great question. I think, really in these cases when someone is very dysregulated, I'm always putting them on some sort of supplements, right? So whether it's like a GABA, which is your calming hormone and neurotransmitter, or something like L-theanine, which is an amino acid that puts your brain and body into that calm state, or maybe using a supplement like lavender if someone's really anxious. Fun fact, lavender has been shown to be just as effective as benzodiazepines for anxiety. And so I think really, having a supplement short term to really calm that nervous system response down really helps a lot of people. And then the next step too is just I really like to start off with something small and simple, which is deep breathing. It is the fastest and most effective way to put your body into that parasympathetic state, and it's because we have a nerve called the vagus nerve. So it runs from your brain, it innervates your throat. This is why talking feels so good, because when we talk, activates the vagus nerve, which puts our body into the parasympathetic state. It also innervates your breathing rate, and it innervates your digestive tract as well. And when we really just take slow, deep belly breaths, immediately your body shifts.
I started doing breath work 4 months ago, and it changed my life. I started doing it more for I worked with like a trauma-informed breathwork coach. So it was like some of that deep, really altered state. But I also have done just like your traditional,
amazing,
like yoga nidra, non-sleep, not-sleep deep rest, all that type of stuff, and it's been so incredibly. I'm like,
I love that.
Because transparency, I've taken Xanax before.
Yep.
And like recreationally when I was in college and hanging around the wrong people, like you said.
Yeah.
And I've gotten into those same states where like you're so relaxed through just the breath, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
I guess I saw one of your pieces of content and it said something about, which is interesting because I did this morning. Did I read that I shouldn't be cold plunging?
That you shouldn't be cold plunging.
That I shouldn't be.
Yes, yeah. So I did make a post
Yeah.
on that. I was commenting on another creator's post, the holistic psychologist, and she just released a study about how using warm water is a much better way to regulate your nervous system. So, I have a hate love relationship with cold plunges. And this is because cold plunging, and depending on how dysregulated your nervous system is, can actually make the stress and dysregulate your nervous system even more. So when I have someone who is in that place of burnout or their nervous system is extremely dysregulated, cold plunging is a big no-no. And instead, something like taking a hot bath works so much better to calm their nervous system response down. And this is where we have to be so careful too, because there's so many hidden stressors in our environment that can dysregulate our nervous system, right? So watching like horror movies. I used to love watching horror movies, and I can't do it anymore because I'm in a really busy, stressful state of life, and it just dysregulates my nervous system so much. So I'm like, this era of my life, no horror movies. Reality TV, doing too hard of like HIIT workouts and things like that. And so it's so important that you have to take a look at like, how does my nervous system feel on a day-to-day basis? Do I feel constantly wired and turned on and stressed out? Doing things that are going to stress you out more is probably going to make all of that feel worse, including cold plunging. And an easy way to tell, cold plunge and see how you feel afterwards. If you don't feel energized, and if you feel like, whoa, that just like completely wiped me out, I have no energy, it's too much and too hard on you.
What do you find works best for you? What tips, tricks, kind of quick strategies have you found that are most effective for you? Understanding that what works for you might not work for everybody, but just to hear for you personally.
Yes, and are you talking about strategies to help me rewire my brain or just maintain my mental health?
Yeah, maybe just general mental well-being strategies that you find work best for you, and maybe also some that people are getting wrong, or that think they're, something like a cold plunge, for example, or things that people think they're doing that are always benefiting them that maybe are not.
Yeah. So I like to keep things very simple. And even when I speak to my patients, build their treatment plans out, I always tell them it is the simple things done consistently over time that are going to give you the best results. And what's great about doing these simple things is that you can actually do them long term instead of having a 10-step morning routine that you do for 3 days and then you feel awful about it because you just fall off track because it was way too much for you to do. One of the things that I do that has been truly like transformational for me, so I've been meditating regularly for the past like 10 years, and it's been one of the best things that have helped me rewire my brain. And every single day, 3 times a day, I sit down, put on a 10-minute timer, and I sit and do deep breathing. And it has been so transformational. It's so simple. It forces me to slow down, forces me to tune in to be like, okay, what version of Bisleen am I showing up as right now? And it allows me to set an intention for that next little segment of my day that I'm stepping into. So that's been a hugely transformational strategy for me that I do on an everyday basis. The other one also has been, again, so simple, but just like going on more walks during the day. Like, it's so underrated. So on top of also doing a 30 to 60 minute workout, throughout the day, I'll go on 10, 15 minute walks and I'll try to get at least that 10,000 step mark that I try to hit. So transformational because, again, helps me to regulate my nervous system, allows me to just have that break during the day and just realign and center myself instead of constantly being on the go. The third thing that's also been very helpful is being very intentional and mindful of at least my breakfast and my lunch. Those are the 2 meals I don't mess around with, okay? Dinner I can mess around with a little bit here or there, but breakfast and lunch, no. And I think those are the 2 biggest meals people do mess around with. Like, everybody plans their dinner and makes it these 3-course meals, but then for breakfast, they're like running out the door, and here they're grabbing like a Tim Hortons bagel. Over there might be like Dunkin' Donuts. And it's so bad for you, especially your brain health, right? Because we need our brain the most in the morning and during the day, right? You don't need your brain power to work the best when you're lounging and watching Netflix. For all I care, have pizza or something. But in the morning and the afternoon, I think it's so important making sure you're getting those key nutrients like 30 grams of protein, eating enough vegetables. I have so many conversations about vegetables in my practice. Everybody thinks they're going to get away without eating vegetables, but I promise you, your body will crash at some point and you will regret not eating vegetables. And also making sure you're getting those like healthy fats in as well. So I feel like those are kind of my top 3 things. And again, Very simple work. It's nothing too complicated that I do. I do have a little bit of a protocol of supplements that I like to take every day as well. But regardless, even if I forget those supplements, these few things really just keep me going.
Yeah, I mean, I for me, like, and maybe this is extreme, but like I'm consistent
Yeah.
with it, and it works every
Yeah.
single day. But one thing that I've done recently that's really helped, that I've actually noticed like a tangible difference, is normally the first thing I've been doing when I get up is check my phone.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Okay.
this time, for the last probably 45 days, I won't touch my
You
phone.
don't
You know,
get
I'll
home.
get up, I'll go on a walk and let my dog out. And so I get outside where I
Awesome.
haven't touched my phone, and it's just so incredibly peaceful. And then I
Yeah.
come back, and that's been really helpful. And then I go to the gym, get my
Awesome.
movement in, and then
So
I always do some sort of mindfulness practice. Sometimes it's breath work, sometimes it's meditation, sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, but I
yeah.
always try to do some form of it.
Amazing.
And then I'll do like I'm not every day, but most days I'm lucky I have, a sauna and cold plunge at my gym.
Yeah.
So I'll do a
Yeah.
sauna and then cold plunge for just like a minute and a half. And and then I shower. And when I walk out of that gym, like,
Amazing.
I feel like $1,000,000. Like I'm like usually it takes from like
Yeah.
5:30ish to like 8, and
Yeah.
then I'll kind of go with my day, and then I'll eat breakfast and go on with my day. But like, I feel amazing. Like I'm like, this is, I could conquer the world right now,
Yeah.
And I understand like it's different for everyone. We all have different circumstances. Some people don't have the ability to
Don't
do
have
all
the
that
time.
stuff, or don't have the time,
Yes.
or have different responsibilities. But that's what's
Yeah.
worked for me so far.
Yeah. That's amazing.
What would you say, or what are your thoughts on, because I saw a post today on this, on like overconsumption? Like that seems to be really popular, and maybe something I struggle with that I haven't really realized until I saw kind of what it's about, which meaning like we're always
Yeah.
listening to a podcast, we're always on our phones. Like you take a walk, well, you got to be listening to a podcast. You're working out, listening to something, consuming something, always learning. Like what is that doing to us, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Before I even speak about like what it's doing to us, I think what I also want to mention is just that we have to understand that we live in a society that thrives on making us feel like we are not good enough every single day of our lives. Every single day of our lives, we are told about what we are lacking, what we could be doing better. And we have to understand, and I'm not trying to go all conspiracy theory or anything here. I'm not even into conspiracy theories, but I'm just saying I think it's so important that we understand that and be aware of that. Because I have conversations all the time when I have patients with people talking about how they feel like they're constantly lacking, they feel like they're behind, they feel like they need to be doing 100 different things to feel enough. And I'm like, you have to understand like the world that you live in is going against that. You're kind of like swimming upstream to feel like you're enough with just all the information that you have. And I think it's so important that we really be aware of that, because I really think that underneath the overconsumption, right, because I'm always about root cause, looking at the beliefs, is underneath that we need to understand the beliefs and the society we live in and what is really driving that need for overconsumption. So honestly, I think that's a great place for everybody, like if you're listening to this, to start and look at, why do you feel the need to do this? Why do you feel the need to have to always be listening to something, to always be learning something, to always be doing something? And where does that come from? And how does it tie into your identity and how you view yourself? And do you believe that you need to constantly be doing something to feel good enough, to feel successful? Because when you can understand those deeper beliefs, it becomes so much easier to start showing up in your life in a different way. And when it comes to overconsumption, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I used to be like the queen of overconsumption. Sometimes I still fall back into, I feel like that's the problem with being a high achiever, right? And I constantly have to catch myself when I feel like I'm doing too much, and I'm always like simplifying my life and doing these check-ins every couple of weeks to make sure I'm not making things be too overcomplicated. Because when you consume too much, it's again, you are overstimulated. And when you're overstimulated, you're constantly keeping your brain in that stress state, that sympathetic state. So maybe you're like listening to a really educational podcast and all of these things are quote unquote good for your brain that you're feeding it, but you're still always on. And one of the things I get some of my patients to do who have a very dysregulated nervous system is sit in silence for 10 minutes. And everybody gets shocked by that. I'm like, put a timer on your phone, go sit on the couch, go sit on a park bench, and just sit there for 10 minutes without scrolling, without doing anything. And it always freaks everybody out because we're just so used to always being on. Do you ever do that? Just sit there and do nothing?
Yeah, I've gotten pretty comfortable over the years with it. Like I can really, even when I do breath work, I can kind of tap in or meditation pretty quickly, but it didn't used to always be that way. Like that's why I'm such a believer in the idea of rewiring your brain, not because I'm a neuroscientist, but because I've just lived it. Like I was very anxious, very, very stressed, and not even like chronically stressed, and I didn't even realize it in the moment. Like I was really dissociated and on autopilot. And as I've started to kind of process my emotions and heal, like one of my favorite things to do, or it was when I was in the city, downtown Chicago, would be to go to the dog park and just sit there and just observe. Like no phone, no nothing. I just loved it. Was so regulating to my nervous system.
So
like
good.
I've realized it real time. Like just being around these like playful animals and they're present, and like it brings out the presence in me, and they come up to you. Like that was something extremely like that I really love.
I love that. And it's so great just to find these simple moments. Like I even find like, the other day I went to go get my blood work taken and I was just sitting down and I didn't pull out my phone. I didn't know how long I was waiting there, but I just sat and I just like looked around and I looked at everybody else around me and everybody's on their phone. No judgment to that by any means, but I think we are a society that's just gotten so used to overconsumption that literally sitting down without pulling out a device like makes people feel uncomfortable. So they just pull out a device because they feel like they need to. And so even just trying to find these micro moments of, are you in line at the grocery store or in line to get your drink from Starbucks or wherever else it is, and can you just have a moment where you're just there, where you're not, filling that in with a podcast or an Instagram scroll or just replying back to an email, because those are all little micro moments during the day where you can have a chance to connect with yourself, regulate your nervous system, and that's a moment for rewiring your brain, literally.
And I feel like that's where you find inspiration. Like you have to give yourself the space. Like I realize, like I hear a lot, Matt, I'm just not a creative person, and it's like I think you just haven't given yourself the space to be creative. Like
100%.
It's very difficult to do that if you're constantly
Yeah.
So now what I've tried to do a little bit of is like when I work out, I'll work out in silence.
Yes.
And just because sometimes like ideas will pop up randomly, or it's just like a nice little reset. Like I'm starting to realize, because I do fall into that category of like, ever since I became an entrepreneur in particular, where like I think it's kind of started to become part of my identity.
Yep.
Where I always feel like I've got to be doing something or learning something or gaining something. So it's been particularly challenging recently, but I'm starting to like actually feel it, where I'm like, I'm consuming too much. And that like, I am benefiting more from just like the stillness, the quiet.
Yes. Yep. 100%. And I think it's so important too, is to look at, okay, you're consuming, but it's like, what are you applying? And it's like, what's the point of consuming if you're not applying? And I think it's so important that, whether an entrepreneur or, especially in business, like I have the belief I only look up to one or two people. That's it. And I want to apply everything that they tell me to do. And even that is enough, because there's such a wealth of information, even just following one or two mentors, instead of feeling like you follow everybody and then all you're doing is learning but not actually properly applying anything. Because even if you apply a couple of things, like you'll be successful. But we just get so lost in that consumption piece of things.
Yeah, so, I mean, gosh, this has been such a great conversation. I want to ask you one last question. It's a big one.
Yes.
What in life are you most proud of?
That is a great question. There's a couple of things. I think
multiple answers.
Multiple answers. I mean, definitely.
We'll allow it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, of course, I think I'm very, very proud of myself for just getting to this place in life. Like, there was a moment where, like, getting out of bed and taking a breath felt like pain. Like, I just remember having weeks, months where just, like, all I felt was this pain in my life. And it felt like this giant fog everywhere. And so just being able to rewire my brain and to look in that mirror and be proud of that woman that stares back at me. Like, I I never thought a life like this was possible. Like at 16, I told myself, I don't think I'm going to make it to 20. Like that's how depressed I felt. And I couldn't see a future even just beyond that. But more recently, what I'm really proud of, I would say as a business owner, just building the business that I have
Yeah.
and really
Yeah, it's hard.
it's like my baby. And right after out of naturopathic medical school, I was one of the few students of my class. Instead of joining a clinic, I just started my practice, and to build something out of nothing was just probably one of the most proudest things I've ever done. And but this goes back to I feel like the only reason I was able to do this is because of my brain health, and because I was able to rewire and build that confidence, that belief in myself that I can do anything that I put my mind to.
Oh, what a great answer. Dr.
Yeah.
Bisleen Attli, everybody. Bisleen, thank you.
Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation, Matt. Thanks for having me.